All right, Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, Worldwide TV Network, Women on TV.tv, IT 247 out of Franklin, Tennessee, and iHeartRadio and all the platforms around the world. So this is a special interview because I love this movie. I've always known about the history of what's going on, but this is really special because the world never really saw what happened when everything was going on over there. I thought that was interesting. Oh yeah, Stanley's coming in shortly.
Yes, he should be here soon.
There we go. All right. He seems to be good.
Is he on? I can't tell.
Yep.
He's there
Oh, yeah,
someplace.
he's
I'm there. I'm there.
Oh, there.
All right, Stanley, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good, good. I've interviewed you in the past before, so at certain junkets here and there.
Oh, great. All right. Great to see you again.
Hey, let's talk about this. This is, I call it the 4 E's. It's exciting, it's entertaining, it's emotional, and it's empathetic. And the reason for that is this story needed to be told. And I don't think it's ever been told this way. Talk about this. What took so long to get this done?
I can never tell you why something has not been done before. I think that, one of the things that happened, about 3 years ago when I started to think about the film is that I felt that, I was at a place in my career where I could tell the story and that we felt that we could raise the necessary money that we would need to tell the story. So, and that, people were getting old and that they were disappearing, the people who were in the yard and the observers and the families of the hostages and others. And so then now was really the right time to tell the story. But why the story has never been told in this way, I don't know.
It's also one of those things where if you're one of those inmates, you don't forget what was going on. You will never forget. And I can only imagine the PTSD that they probably went through, all the past experience of everything that was going on with that. Not good. Talk about having those records when everything comes down to it.
Tracy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, you have it absolutely right, Brian. This was a profound trauma in the lives of every single person who experienced it, especially the prisoners. There are those for whom every year of the last 50 years from September 9th through September 13th is deeply triggering for them. It was very emotional. I think it's one of those things when you go through something that has such an emotional impact on you, it sort of imprints itself on your psyche. And so I think what you hear and see of all of the people, but especially the prisoners in the film, is sort of the echoes of those memories. It's very painful for all of them, not only because of what they went through. They lived through a massacre, essentially, a lot of them compared it to what it must be like to have lived through war or been in a war zone. But they also were targeted for death basically by their own government, by the state. And that's not something that lets go of you. And there's this thing that I read in one of the books about Attica that says that Attica has a way of holding people. And I found that for every single person, not only the prisoners, the families who lived in Attica Village, the hostage survivors, the media members, the attorneys, the observers, every single person, that is absolutely true. I think you see it, and that last thing that Clarence Jones says in the film, that he will never, ever, I think he says ever 4 times, forget what happened at Attica, because it just, it's just something that just cannot, people just can't let go of, and it doesn't let go of them because of what happened.
Stanley, I knew going back into your history, you probably knew what was going on. You heard what was going on as you were growing up. What did you not know about doing this film?
One of the things I never knew and I never heard was why the prisoners rebelled. Why the whole thing started. It's almost like, the news reported it as like, of course they weren't happy. They're not supposed to be happy. they're prisoners, and they never talked about the fact that there were real problems in Attica, that they were being abused both mentally and physically, and that never, and that was never reported. I also, really never knew the kind of behind the scenes things that were happening with Rockefeller and Nixon, and that Rockefeller's wanting to be president really drove him to do things which were incredibly destructive. So there's so much about the story that we kind of never really reported.
Traci, when it comes back to this, doing the research and everything like that, what stuck out in your mind of being that single person of color who happens to be a woman? Well, how did you see this, and why was that important for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in some ways, being a Black person, being a Black woman in this country, it is not and should not be surprising to know that the state responds to a challenge to its authority and power with violence, right? Like, in some ways, that is one of the most consistent experiences of what it is to be a Black person in this country. And still, to fully take in and understand and see what happened on September 13th, 1971, to feel it, as I think we sort of invite and offer viewers an opportunity to do in the film, the way the people that went through it experienced it is still just so mind-blowing, because you just do not expect your government to wantonly massacre you when you are just asking to have a recognition of your humanity. And so I think that's the thing that really just sort of struck with me and stayed with me the most throughout this film. And also just the way that, as you see in that call with Nixon and Rockefeller, the need for the state to justify what happened by basically trying to criminalize Blackness. And you hear how badly Nixon wants this to be a story about, as he says, the Blacks. Although the prisoners make it very clear that they had coalesced around this political identity of being prisoners in their demands for change in the prison. And so I think all of those things, as a Black filmmaker approaching this story, were just was probably most striking to me.
It's also interesting, and this is for both of you, is when you talk to the guards. I know when I'm talking to my police officer friends, I talk to them outside the uniforms, because when they put on that uniforms, they're in a whole different mindset. When they're outside that uniform and when they were back in the day in the uniform, what did you notice, the ones that you got a chance to talk to? Their mindset, it's completely different, isn't it?
Traci?
Yeah, I think, you don't actually hear from the guards in the film, but it was not for lack of trying. I certainly spoke to as many of them, the former hostages, as I could. Ultimately, they all decided to not participate in the film. And obviously, as guards, they're going to have a very different perspective on what it was to work in the prison and what it was to have been hostages. But the one thing I will say that I found to be true, not only for the guards, but also the prisoners, is that all of them feel like they were harmed by the state of New York, and that there never has been any justice, or even so much as an apology from the state. And I think at this point, 50 years later, a lot of them are kind of feel like that would be too little too late. But that was certainly something that I heard across the board from all of those people, however they felt about their individual experience of what happened during those days. All of them feel like they were harmed and did not receive any justice for what happened to them.
Yeah, in the film, you hear from a couple of National Guards who were there, and they got there, the last couple of days. And so they weren't as traumatized and tired, and worn out from being there the whole 5 days that many of the other law enforcement officers were. They also went in as help for the medical team, and basically were carrying stretchers and trying to deal with the medical fallout of the retaking. And they, were as traumatized as everybody else. And in some ways, they were traumatized in a very different way, because they saw what was happening and they couldn't stop it. And they couldn't intervene. They couldn't do anything. And because they couldn't stop it and couldn't intervene, and they were part of enforcement. In a way, that they were part of it, but they kind of weren't, and so they were really traumatized. In the film, you see one of the National Guardsmen, and his eyes are all red, and he's just totally still to this day, 50 years later, upset by what happened and what he saw happen, and what he saw happen, and couldn't intervene.
Stanley, I think of this, and this goes for you too, Traci. I remember talking to Ken Burns and interviewing the Central Park 4 or 5, whatever it was. And it was one of those things where this reminds me of that. Not only was it an honor to talk to them, you knew how they felt. I can only imagine, as you guys were interviewing them, what this felt like talking to them. What is this like for you two now? Because now you get the story. And also what was left out. There's always interesting things that were left out that might not have fit in.
I want to say that we really, made the film that we wanted to make. I try not to sit there, during the film and think about, what was left out. Certainly we could have done, a 4-part series and taken it to kind of, what the conditions in the prison before, a little bit more, and we could have done a lot more with what happened after in the cover-up. But we were contracted to kind of make it a 2-hour film, and I think it stands, as that, and it works as that.
Traci?
Yeah. So to your first question about what was it like to sort of get to talk to these people, it wasn't easy. I mean, I think any empathetic person, when you see somebody hurting, your instinct is to sort of want to stop it or help them. And I mean, there were very few interviews that I did where there were not tears. Very few, either tears or rage that felt very fresh about what happened. And your instinct is to sort of want to stop somebody when they do that. But my job was to really just create the space for these people to say it and experience it, talk about it and feel it the way that they did, and then kind of get out of the way and let them do that. So it was not an easy experience, but I'm just so profoundly grateful to all of the people who agreed to share these parts of their lives with us for the film and trusted us that we would do it some justice.
If I remember, I think it's up for Critics' Choice Awards documentary, if I'm correct. Remind me of that. I'm going through them right now for stuff. And then the other thing is, the last question is, what would you get the audience to turn out to see this movie on Showtime? Because I love what Showtime does in their doc sessions. I think they're the best when it comes to that.
So it's up for Best Documentary, Best Historical Documentary, and Best Directing. So it's up for 3 awards at the Critics' Choice Awards. We're trying to think of kind of a tagline, something like, you don't know Attica or something, because I think that, there's a certain amount and a huge amount of the population we found, especially younger people, who don't know anything about Attica, like nothing, and so there's one set of the population. Other people, who are around or know something about Attica, they might think they know, about it, but I think the film, proves that they don't know. One of the things that was so interesting when we screened it for the former prisoners, some of them came up to me afterwards and said, I didn't know all that. I didn't know all that. Where'd you get the footage? Where did you get all that footage? I've never seen that stuff before. So I think, for everybody, we're telling a story, and we're telling a story with the 4 E's that that you said, which is great. I'm gonna steal that from you.
Hey, I came up with it back in October of 1993, and I told, Cisco about it, and Roger Ebert loved it. And I said, you know what? I can't do a thumbs up when I'm going to have a 3rd thumbs. I'm like, no, I'm going to come up with the 4 E's. So I said, a good film has got these: entertaining, exciting, emotional, empathetic. It could be, it could be empty, but that's not what this is. Everybody needs to see this, and I don't do a one and done. So on my Tuesday night shows, I always tell people, You need to see this movie, and this is why you need to see this. So this is how I do our part. That's why we have 10 million views a day and counting. And I want to thank you guys for reaching out, because I miss our junkets. I miss seeing everybody in person. Maybe I'll see you at the African American Film Critics Awards. You know, we'll see if it's still in virtual or in person or not. Stanley, I want to thank you. Keep up the great job. Tracy, thank you for what you guys did. All right.
Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.